Okay, so I'm with the Conservation Commission in Middletown Springs, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a small village in the foothills southwest of Rutland. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere, um, and it's a beautiful little valley, and in the midst of it, we've got a patch of woods that was donated to the town by a couple with the surname Sullivan, and the patch of forest is now known as Sullivan Educational Woods. It was donated back in the early 2000s, um, and it's sort of a second growth forest, 14 plus acres, and I guess Bill said that these were going to be exciting presentations, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to measure up to that. But hopefully there's some amount of insight provided. When the forest started out, and the Conservation Commission was given stewardship of it, there was a lot of energy, and there was sort of like, as I'm sure you're familiar with in small towns around Vermont, um, there are sort of waves of people that get energized about doing something on behalf of the town, and then they get stretched out very thin, and then they kind of flare out, and other people need to come in. And there's some endurance runners who are able to stay involved in things for long periods of time. But when the Sullivan Educational Woods started out, there was a kind of a big ball of energy around it, and there were some faculty members from Green Mountain College who were in natural resources with children in the town. So there was sort of a constellation of factors that brought a lot of energy to the forest in the early going. And when we moved to Middletown in 2009, there was still like get-togethers there at night, and for kids and families and things like that. And a management plan was in place. And the trails were cleared, and the outdoor classroom was cleared and stuff like that. But over time, that energy dissipated. And towards the end of the 2010s, we started trying to get some people back together to re-energize things. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so that upended a lot of people's, kind of connection and ability to engage. And so it's been sort of a stumbling process, and more dragged out than I myself as an individual would like it to be. But it is what it is, and trying to get support, like regular support for people to be involved in a conservation commission and whatnot, is difficult in our town. I know it is different in some towns. I think it's a stage where we're at. But like I work full time with two children. I'm driving back and forth to Ludlow, and I'm on 4 different positions with the town that are volunteer. So trying to keep pushing those all along is a little bit challenging. But that said, it's a beautiful forest. It is accessed by residents. And it was donated expressly for the purpose of education and conservation. Its use is restricted under our stewardship role we can do management activities in it, but they would be done for demonstration purposes. And we can certainly be doing invasive control. And there are a lot of forest health issues obviously facing Vermont forests right now, like the ash borer and beech bark disease and whatnot. So we do have some challenges in the forest, and we really do need to bring together a full-on forest health assessment for the 14 acres. And my idea there is to try and get in touch with a school like Paul Smith's or even UVM for a student or two who just need a project site to work on, and to come out and be able to help us out with that, because Even though some of us are natural resource people, it's hard to dedicate the focused time to it. So the forest is a mix um, of different types. It's got some hemlock forest and it's got some old pine, but it's really sort of moving towards a northern hardwoods forest of beech and maple, some yellow birch, and a tiny bit of spruce that's starting to come in. But it's reached a point also where we've got a lot of the mature older trees are starting to break up in the canopy now, and so we get some really high winds in Middletown at times, and on any number of occasions over the last few years, we've had some big trees come down in there. And we have a loop trail through the forest, so that's required recurring attention with chainsaws and groups of volunteers to go out and clear the trail of brush and impassable fallen timber. And we need to get some volunteers out to get on top of barberry and Japanese honeysuckle, a couple other plants that are starting to coalesce there. It's not at a problem level right now. Like some of our woods are full of barberry, and certainly honeysuckle, and for ticks and whatnot, barberry is a pain in the neck. So we do want to get out there and get that removed. And we do have plans during the next year to have volunteers go out and do that. But it does get a lot of wildlife use. There's a lot of deer, and some bird species, which some of us notice, but we want to get a survey done of that also, in a more focused way, rather than just the odd random observation. So there's just a couple of, there is a wetland in the woods that's kind of interesting. And as I'll discuss later, there's a stream that's running through that. That's what our current project that we got funded for is designed to address for the trail. But a lot of the understory in the forest is open. Still, as the canopy breaks up, I expect that to fill in more and more. And unfortunately, a lot of it's with beech, which is suffering mightily there as it does across the broader landscape. So the loop trail, we need a new loop sign. I just threw it in there just because it said loop, but that's part of the signage, is part of what we're working on. We did do, that's another commission member's suggestion. We used metal signs, and those don't work that well because the trees start to grow around them. So we're going to go back out and reblaze the trail in the coming year. But it's a nice half-hour work. It's generally very accessible for even people with some physical limitations would be able to get in and access part of the forest from the main road. But the bridge over the stream, as we'll see, is a key piece of it, because that is some treacherous ground on the walk. We do, over the years, there have been, like I said early on, there were far more events out there. But we'll be working with the Middletown Library this fall to do some get-togethers with children out there and do storytelling and some nature time. Had a couple of small events out there over the last year or two. There's a Girl Scout group that's become active in town, so they've been out there and they've participated in different Conservation Commission events. And then when we do trail work, it involves volunteers who bring their own chainsaws and saws and rakes and everything else. So it's all, we have like a $200 budget that gets reapproved by the town to work with. So the funds that are made available by through the tiny grants are, they're not these enormous grants, but they help us with the scale we're at. It does make a difference. These benches are made from cedar cookies, just cross sections of fallen cedar that were put together by students at the elementary school, supervised by the former principal who liked to do woodworking jobs like this. So we've got benches like this all, out along at various places along the loop trail, and they hold up pretty well. That's the wetland on the left-hand photo. That one is kind of positioned to look out over part of the wetland. And then the photo on the right is the outdoor classroom, which was much more open when we moved to town, but I've managed to clear it all back to roughly its original shape. And we've got a couple of the benches, and there's some logs in the background in there for people to sit on. So that was sort of a teaching and sharing area that we had a few years back that we did with the elementary school. This is the new kiosk we just put up. And we did the old one blew down earlier in 2023. So we worked with Mill River Union High School, which has a program for students doing woodwork and other projects. Tim Parent is the lead faculty member there. So basically, we're set up with them where when we have projects like this, we can work with them and just pay for materials, and they do all the labor. They delivered the kiosk to the site, set it up. So it's a pretty good arrangement. And a lot of those kids are from, Middletown is a feeder school into Mill River, so they're kind of getting back involved with their own community that way. Those are just some other perspectives on the kiosk. On the right-hand side, the outdoor classroom is situated right by that. And this is how as you enter the woods. These are some of the students in shop working on the project. No faces, just their bodies. The next project, which we've got funding through the Tiny Grants for, is for a footbridge across a stream zone, which is here. A few pictures of it. It's rough ground, bouldery ground. The stream zone, you can't really, it's hard to tell from the photo, but it flares out here where it's the only really kind of flat area with dry ground on either side of it that we could get across. So we need about a 12-foot or more footbridge, and it's going to be anchored with gravel footings and so on. But you can see the ground. If you're an older person or at all limited in how you can walk, it's treacherous ground, and it's a ephemeral stream. So most of the year it's wet. And the odd week or so during the summer it might be dried up, but generally it's not great to walk through. Just to go back, this is the bridge, a rough idea of what it will be like, but just with one rail going over it. That's what they'll be constructing and installing for us for the project. And how am I on time, Marion?
We do need to wrap up soon.
Okay,
so
good. Okay, so these are just some other projects that we have to deal with. I've mentioned some of them already. Again, some images of the forest and just trail marking and trail maintenance with a lot of downed trees. These are some of our community partners, who I've already mentioned, and then final shot of the woods with a little light flowing through it. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. Thanks so much for that presentation, and hopefully it was helpful for folks to see. There was one question in the chat from Michelle asking about if the woods support any bat species. Not sure if you have a...
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do the woods support any bat species?
Yeah, I like, again, like I want to get that kind of survey done. Because we actually do have healthy bat populations in Middletown Springs. And I know that because I love going out in the evening and watching them, and we have a lot in my neighborhood, which is not too far from the forest. But in terms of nesting and stuff, I'm not really sure at this time. There's something else that I'd like to pursue. Yeah,
Great.
and even if we needed to install anything, that would be great. A great project also.
That's great. Well, some future ideas for tiny grants, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks,
Sure.
Steve. If you could
Thank
go
you
ahead and
for all
stop.
your work. It's a blessing to us.